my time. Fuck it with you. Oh, let me show you how. Find me another. You can't break me down. Under the covers. Touch just to break it. You thought that I would need it back, but you didn't know that I faked it. No tears, no heart attack. Leave it all behind. Love me a new one. I won't waste my time. Fuck it with you. Oh, let me show you how. Find me another. You can't break me down. Under the covers. Just to break it. You thought that I would need it back, but you didn't know that I faked it. No tears, no heart attack.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Joint Collegiate Week as we have another talk show coming in on the CR6 and CEA Siege channels. Today is a little bit different from the talk show you would have seen a couple of days ago, I believe on Thursday. That was a little bit more focused on casting. But today, if you look at the beautiful faces that are joined with me on the screen, we have Spectrum, Headless, and Christian. These are all players that have clawed their way up to the top, up in the NA Pro League, Canadian Pro League, as well as Canadian Challenger League. And they did have their humble beginnings in collegiate. So I guess the best way to start would be just going through a quick little introduction, saying your name, who you play for, that kind of stuff. So whoever wants to go ahead and take it away can start.
I guess I can start. Hi, my name's Headless, everybody. I'm on the CACL team for PDHM Gaming.
Uh,
Spectrum.
my name is Specky or Spectrum, and I play for the CAPL team Livid Gaming.
Okay, I'm Christian. Some of you guys might know me as eCentral, and I'm the analyst for Dark Zero Esports.
Yeah, and so all of these guys already have their roots up at the top of the Rainbow Six Siege competitive scene. But that's not why you're here. We're more on the collegiate side, but all of them, like I said earlier, started out with their humble beginnings here. So I know Headless was from York University, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
As well as Spectrum was with Simon Fraser, Simone Fraser, one of
Simon.
those.
Yep.
And then Christian, what college were you from or affiliated with?
Texas A&M.
Okay, yeah, Texas A&M. I've heard some really great things about them. more so on the CR6 side of things. I know your team's also tearing it up in our CEA Summer League as well. But I guess if anybody wants to take the stage on if you've played any other games on a competitive level or how that sort of started leading your path towards Siege.
Mhm.
Any-
Um, I'll go first, I guess.
Okay.
So it was kind of interesting because I played on Xbox for most of my life. I've only been on PC for about a year and a half, 2 years ish, and I really I was a very competitive person. I played soccer at a high level, and so I sort of Destiny One was the start of my like I want to play video games and grind video games. I put like 3,500 hours into that game, and then said, it's not going anywhere like in a competitive scene. Moved on to Titanfall 2, which I made a little bit of money off of on local tournaments and stuff, and was really fun. It was probably one of my favorite games of all time. And then discovered Siege and was like, oh, this is my game. Um, and I didn't really pursue it competitively too much on console, but as soon as I got on PC, I remember like my first name had like a tag at the end of it because I didn't even like I just jumped straight into a team with my friends and we started playing in like T4 and stuff. So yeah, that was sort of the process of getting to Siege competitively for me.
I can go next, I guess. I haven't really ever played a game competitively besides Siege. I've played it like I don't know. I play most games casually, but I've always been drawn to FPSs. And like Spectrum, I had my roots on PS4, well, console instead of Xbox. And Siege just drew me in. And after I switched to PC, I still played casually for a while. I didn't like try and pursue any like competitive scene. I mostly just stayed in ranked, played with friends, chilled. And then recently in the last like year or so, I thought, hey, maybe I want to try comp. And then here we are. Started in collegiate and then went to CACL and hopefully CAPL in the future.
Okay, I played on console, and I was top 500 in Overwatch playing DPS, and then I transitioned over to support. I kind of realized that I couldn't really get anywhere too far on console pretty early on, so I ended up switching over to PC at one point. But then I realized that my skill was not going to transfer nearly as well. So I ended up basically just riding off my game sense for quite a bit. I ended up coaching some teams for some smaller orgs. Um, and then from there, I basically moved from Overwatch to PUBG and then to finally to Siege, where I ended up playing with Texas A&M University on their Alpha Squad. And I believe the first time we made it to the playoffs, we got like top 8 in Collegiate R6. And then the second season, we ended up getting second place in the grand finals, and we inevitably got reverse swept. So yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that seems like Siege has just grabbed everybody's attention with the like how complex and interesting the game can be. But with that, we can go ahead and talk about our first question coming in from chat from Hyper saying, "What is your opinion on this 20-second meta that is currently plaguing the pro scene as well as any other comp experiences?"
Uh, I think we should probably just keep the same order for the rest of the podcast.
Yeah,
So I guess
we'll go Spectrum, me, and
I'll
then
go first.
Christian.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good
Yeah.
idea.
I think it's. I mean, I don't really. To me, I don't really mind it too much because it makes it for some interesting like chaotic moments, but at the same time, there's a lot of downtime throughout the round, and like it ends up being then this the game ends up being more so about just who can clear utility the best, right? Which I'm not really a fan of. But I understand like, it benefits other teams and it definitely does take skill to be able to coordinate and do that. But I think that the way that the game's shifting now, sort of, as we've seen recently, is like getting a first pick is really important, right? Teams will play off of getting that first pick. And I think I like that style of siege much more. But I definitely so I'm glad that it's switching off of sort of the 20-second meta, so to speak. But I definitely do think that it was very interesting for a time to have just so much utility in the game so that you basically couldn't do anything other than burn utility for 2 minutes and 30 seconds and then have to execute with, 30 seconds left on the board with sometimes 5v5, right? It made for very chaotic and interesting moments, but like at the same time, it gets pretty boring, right? Because you're sitting there for half the round or more that just doing nothing almost, right?
Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay. I feel like the 20-second meta, it was like like Spectrum was saying, it's interesting for a while, but at this point, after it's been done for like so long, I feel like a change would be useful because it's not as interesting to just see a utility dumping simulator. That sounds like a little rude to say, but it's somewhat accurate.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know. I think that if we were to shift, like you was saying, towards more of like a pick and like I don't know a different meta than the 20-second meta where we're just dumping as much utility as you can, getting rid of utility. Like Siege, it's built off that where defenders set up all their stuff, and attackers are there to clear it all out with their utility. But like it's a little drastic right now with the meta that we're in, and I think a little bit of a change would be go a long way.
Okay. I guess for me, I think the obvious issue is like there's just so many bulletproof gadgets, and there's also like an overwhelming addition to like the defensive gadgets. Like they've gotten bulletproof cameras, and they just recently got like the motion sensor. Obviously, like Maestro being released, I think that was kind of what kickstarted it all. And then a lot of their gadgets are not. It's not only that they're bulletproof; they're actually just receiving so many in terms of quantity, like 3 Goyo shields and like 3 Melusi gadgets. It's just too much compared to what the actual attackers have at their disposal, and you value, but you also devalue flashbangs a bit because they're not intended for what they're supposed to do. They're actually used literally for utility, or yeah, for clearing ADSs. In terms of the actual like meta, from like a coaching perspective, it's a lot more, I guess, entertaining to watch than it would be for a player. I could see how it's very frustrating, but it's not so much that it's entertaining. It's just you get to see exactly which players are very skilled in terms of like their sequencing or whatever. But it means like using a specific amount of flashbangs first versus using explosives, just things like that. You start to really see who are like the disciplined players.
Yeah, I think if I wanna throw in my hat a little bit from a casting perspective, it does sort of create the lull where you have to have a good amount of color commentary to talk about people sitting outside the building and droning and trying to coordinate where they want their push. It does require a little bit more game sense to try to predict and know where exactly this push is gonna happen. Typically, it happens about like that 40 to 30 seconds is where people start throwing flashbangs. But then you can also get those really cool clips. Like, I don't know if you guys watched the LATAM clip on Yellow Stairs of Consulate where there's a Jaeger sitting there, then all of a
Oh
sudden
yeah,
12 flashbangs hit him and he gets destroyed by a
Uh,
nade followed right behind. So there still
yeah.
is some sort of like that explosive level of like caliber action. But when it breaks down to its core, when you have castle barricades, Goyo shields, deployable shields with Wamai gadgets and Jaeger ADSs all together, it kind of kills the variety of how you have to attack certain areas. Because if you think about probably from an analyst perspective, you have your specific steps on your checklist of what needs to happen in order to be successful. Like you need to take the X, Y, and Z control, then you can try to get a pick. And in comparison to a game like Counter Strike, which that's how I got my start into competitive with Collegiate, it's like what you were talking about earlier, Specky, with the you get a pick and you just kind of ride off of that. And that's a little bit more exciting and it has a little bit more variety. But as we've seen with the 20-second meta, you kind of have to bring a Zofia, you have to bring an Ash. You can't really bring breaching charges on some operators, such as like a Nomad, because you need those extra flashbangs in your back pocket, or else you're not going to be able to get one of those anchors out of their position, and then you can't go for your execute necessarily. So trying to get variety is because variety at the end of the day, it's the spice of life. And when you're watching an esport or playing in it, you don't want to be bored just doing the same thing over and over again. You don't want to bang your head against the wall and be like, hey, as soon as we throw 6 flashbangs here, you have to shoot. And if we miss this shot, we're gonna lose the round. But to that certain extent, you still want the high level competitive integrity of when you have your teams working in unison in order to continue that push in. That's where you're seeing those really high level teams excel constantly and being able to produce that sort of coordination at the highest level, at the consistent level, and just continue pushing through is really nice to see. But also, I think with the Echo ban that's currently in pretty much all competitive due to invincible yokai drones. I think that that's helping to build into more of the pick heavy meta that we're seeing. I know Veli tweeted out a couple of days ago, I'm not missing seeing Echo in T1 right now because it's leading to a little bit more exciting things. But with that, I guess, do you guys wanna talk about your specific school experiences with your comp and how that sort of helped to mold you as a player, or specifically get your foot in the water, dip your toes in the pool, or jumping all the way into the highest level?
Um, so yeah, I SFU was actually sort of the last bit of comp that I got before before actually making it into the Canada division. I started in T3, right? I played on Polar Ace and Born and a couple other teams, and then took a break for about a year, and then showed up at SFU, went to the sort of the club day because my friends dragged me to it, and I like saw the big SFU esports booth. I was like, yes. I went over and immediately it was like, and like I asked, I was like, "Do you guys have a siege team?" And they're like, "Yup." And that was kind of the end of that story. I didn't even have to show up to tryouts. Like I just sent my stats in, and Rowdy, our who's on my team now, he was team captain on SFU, and he was kind of just like, "Yeah, it's okay. You don't have to try out. We'll just take you on the team." And I was like, "Okay." And yeah, it was the tryouts were actually at a local LAN. They just brought the team and like the people they were trying out, and I was there with my teammates, like with just my like pug stack that I brought, and he just sort of watched the footage back and was like, "Yeah, he's good enough. Don't worry about it." So yeah, and it's actually kind of interesting because out of the last CR6 season, the 4 out of the 5 players that we played with are now on my team in the Canada division. So we took the core of that roster and sort of like just moved it over. We're like, yeah, we're just gonna go here now. So a little interesting, but I definitely think that was the it like reignited my desire to play Siege competitively in a sense.
Yeah. Uh, I agree that your roster switch over, that was pretty sick actually. That how you had like your collegiate team basically just switching over and just getting your fifth.
Yeah.
Um, for myself though, uh, I hadn't really like played Siege competitively that much beforehand, but I found out that my school had a Siege team, and I wasn't really involved with the esports at York previously. Some of my friends were on the Rocket League team, and that's how I actually figured out that we had a Siege team after after I didn't make the tryouts for the Rocket League team. um, and after I got to know the at the time captain of the siege team for Rainbow Six, I noticed that like our team wasn't doing the best at the time because I believe they played one CEA match sorry, one CEA season beforehand, and they didn't do too well. But with the addition of myself and a couple of other players, I think that we what's it called? I think that we improved the roster quite a bit, and we we worked together really well. Like two of us didn't speak English as well as the other ones because they were international students from China, but we I don't know, it just sort of clicked one day. And there was an event nearby at the Waves E Gaming Center. It was a LAN event. I think it was 1500 prize pool, and we had the team together, like that roster together for maybe like 2 3 weeks, and we didn't really know each other except for the people that were already together beforehand. And the day just went like really well, and we ended up winning, and we thought that we really had something special, and we went on to go do the CEA. I think it was the fall season, the fall open season, and uh we ended up facing Miami and dropping there. And after that I took a bit of a break, and I think it was a month or two break from Siege. And one of my teammates from York actually approached me afterwards, and he said, "Hey, these guys saw us at the LAN and they want to pick us up for their org to try out for CACL and CAPL." And so then after that, we ended up just going along with that, picking up a new fifth because one of the fifth player for the York team couldn't play in CACL. He didn't meet some of the requirements, like living in Canada anymore. And I don't know. We went through a couple of roster changes and I believe I'm the only one from the York roster still on the CACL roster. Originally it was all five, or it was 4 out of 5 of us, and yeah, I wouldn't say that we're the best team in the league right now in the CACL league, but I think that we can really contend with the rest of the teams because we got pretty close on the game that we lost to go to the losers bracket. The most recent game, I don't that one wasn't that good. I don't know if anyone's seen it. I think it's on the Rainbow Six YouTube right now. It was a little rough. But here we are. We're here still to grind and ready to go to the next step. Christian?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about rough, you can look at my
Oh
last
yeah,
game.
I saw that as well.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
don't need to talk about
we,
that
we
one.
don't need to talk about our last games, bro. It's okay.
Yeah, I don't really want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess for my experiences, what got me started in the collegiate siege, we actually didn't have a team. Somebody else, who was kind of come and went. He was the initial captain. He created the team, and he got me together and got a majority of my friends that were on the collegiate or the TMU collegiate team. But initially, I wanted to do intramural. I think it was like baseball or softball at the time, but I had just missed the deadline. I was like, well, I want to do something that like is kind of club based. So I figured the best thing that I could do is kind of join the collegiate siege team and just I guess meet some new friends or whatever. And we weren't really good at first, but I remember our owner is actually an Aggie as well. And he kind of hopped into our Discord and was like, "Hey, like, just, we're looking to scrim you guys. I think it'd be really fun." So we ended up doing that because they were kind of looking for scrim partners at the time. So we hopped into a match with them, and I don't remember exactly how it went. I was busy. I know we probably got creamed. I mean, it was DZ versus the the collegiate team, I guess. So it wasn't pretty. But nonetheless, they ended up inviting us out to the house, and at the same time, before we even scrimmed those guys, I ended up sending in an application for to be their analyst. I know BKN was basically looking for an analyst at the time, so I sent in an application during spring break, and so obviously from the pro league side, that went incredibly well. But yeah, it was basically all inspiring. But that's after that scrim with DZ, there was just some elements of our game that just basically went to the next level. We were able to kind of see what they did and how they did it, and then we also had a conversation with them afterwards, exactly what their methods were, and it immediately translated. Like we immediately went from being kind of like a scrub, collegiate team to I mean, we took top 8, which is back then was kind of it was pretty close at the top. There was two really good teams, and then the rest was kind of middle of the pack. But then the season after that, when we really got to apply all those things during the off season, it just you could tell right away.
Yeah, you really broke through the ice. There's one thing about like watching Pro League and being like, okay, their gun skill's pretty good. They work well as a team. And then as you go into like more of the analyst side, and I feel like I've gotten to it a little bit more on the casting side. You can appreciate some of the really nuanced factors and the really small things that really make the biggest difference and separate those good teams to the great teams. I guess my story in starting in collegiate is my freshman year, one of my friends was on the CS:GO team, and one of their guys just quit the team, and so I ended up subbing for a couple of games. Did all right. I kind of learned keyboard and mouse on Counter Strike, so I just played the op and clicked, and sometimes people died, sometimes they didn't. But after that, one of my friends was on the NCSU Siege team at the same time I was doing CS:GO, and then he actually transferred and was like, "Yo, you're almost just as good as me. You should go see, maybe play with them a couple of ranked games." And so I started playing with them. We started making our roster. We did pretty well, like our first season. Before that, NCSU, it was just kind of like a jokish team. Like it was just some friends playing together. Then we actually started doing some strats. We would actually scrim and stuff like that. Like we got second place in open, got our way into invite for CEA bracket. And yeah, in getting second place to Akron, where they absolutely smacked us down to the ground and brought our egos down to the dirt because they're actually a pretty good team. Then we got to invite, and the same thing happened again, where we were getting smacked around, ended up having to go to relegations, played against Specky's team. So I guess I can say I lost to a pro league team, and that's why I'm in open of CEA. So I guess we can say that's a good thing as well. But shifting the topic off of that, we have another hot question coming from chat talking about the most recent switch from blacklisted skins such as like Blood Orchid, Ember Rise, and all of those ones just sort of not being allowed and toward a shift of more whitelisted, like you have to run pilot programs or pro league sets. What do you guys necessarily think of that change to the cosmetic side of competitive Siege?
By far my favorite change. um, like you have no idea how many times where it's like, if I see somebody and I kill them and I call to my team, I don't know who I just killed, right? Like you're just like I don't know, and then you gotta go check the body and you look at the face, you're like, oh, that was a Sophia, um, but or it's like also I'm colorblind, right? So it's like there are certain maps that are hard for me to play, Villa Cafe, for example. Um, but it makes it even harder when it's like you think people if you see the pictures on Twitter where it's like spot the attacker, right? And it's like with the ember eyes. It's like you think that's hard for you? How do you think I feel? Like I can't see them normally. um but no, I definitely think it's a really good change. I haven't It definitely kind of makes me a little bit more angry when I play ranked though, because I'm like, this kid's running ember eyes. Ah. But it hasn't. It's sort of taken my mind off of like I just have to think more about online siege, Peeker's advantage, my positioning, and like my gunfights. Right. I don't have to think about like, oh, what if I don't even see him because he's blending in with a wall. Right. What if he's hiding in a rat corner. Right. I don't. Those concerns aren't really a thing anymore with the whitelist, and I think it's also really good for um exposure sort of for teams because it means that most teams are going to be running the pilot program skins and the pro league skins if not defaults, right? So they're going to be running defaults, which is fine, whatever, and then it means the only skins are promoting the teams in the pro scene. So I think that that's really a step in the right direction. One thing I would like to see is pro players getting um, the past pro league skins given to their accounts because I would like them. Not gonna happen. Not gonna happen. But I'd like it. But yeah, I think it's definitely a good change.
Yeah, I agree pretty much entirely with what all of Spectrum was saying. He has a little bit of a more of a disadvantage with the skins being colorblind, but for everyone else, it's terrible as well. It's like you would shoot someone like you was saying, and you have no idea who you shot, and you're like, I killed someone. I don't know. Like it is just not a good situation, and I really don't think it's that much of a problem to I know a lot of people were complaining, but I don't think it's that much of a problem just to put all of your skins to default. It doesn't. It's not that much effort, and I know that in one of our CACL games, actually, my teammates still had one of their skins on, not default. It's kind of rough. We had to restart and lost the round. It's sort of like how I think it was NJR
It was
or
Knicks.
Nix.
Knicks.
Sorry,
That
not
is, yeah.
NJR. Nix. Yeah, yeah. Nix had to restart a couple times. Aside from stuff like that where it messes up the game, I think that it's a good change. I think that it was necessary, and I think that, like he was saying, it helps promote pro league skins, the pro league sets where it's specific for teams. I think it just helps. Just I don't think there's a downside except if you paid money for skins and you're upset that you can't play them anymore. That's the only thing, but you can still play them in ranked.
Yeah, I guess you guys covered the main issues. I've seen a few people talk about like why elite skins are banned in Pro League as well. So I guess I'll touch on that a little bit. Um, I guess with elite skins, one thing is I feel like there's almost like an obligation to make the gadgets look really cool because obviously they're not standard looking gadgets. Like for example, the Twitch drone is obviously going to be ridiculously overpowered. It has its own camo. So whenever you start to introduce like more elite skins, it's gonna really conceal like some of those gadgets. Like I can only imagine like years down the road, they try and make a Melusi elite skin and it's like just camouflage into the wall and you won't be able to see it. That's gonna be an issue, right? So I think as long as some people kind of recognize that, I think if I want to pay for a skin, I want it to be complete in terms of what exactly it changes. If I'm playing like in ranked or whatever, and obviously it doesn't affect me. I'm not a player. Um, so yeah, I guess I wanted to clarify that.
And I guess throwing my 2 cents into it as well, you were talking about, like, necessarily the pilot program skins and how they grow the scene, but it's also from, like, a competitive advantage of none of the skins really blend in with anything. You have some bright red Empire skin, you have a Vigil for Team Liquid that's bright neon blue, and it's like, "Okay, I'm not gonna worry about him coming up main stairs of Villa and blending into the wall because he's bright blue." And it also puts a little bit extra money into the prize pools of those tournaments. So it's like no harm, no foul. I guess when you talked about the elite skins, that's probably the biggest one with they're what, like $20 a pop almost? They're like about like 15-ish USD. Do you feel like you have to buy like the whole 20 pack to be able to get one? But, like, when you're thinking about it to the certain extent of we're playing with a different set of rules from the rest of Siege to maximize the competitive integrity and the enjoyment of all of the players as well, that's probably the primary concern is making sure that there's no extra BS that the players have to fight as opposed to already fighting against very, very talented players, trying to not take away any of those small advantages that could be sort of inadvertent consequences. I'm sure the people at Ubisoft, when they released Ember Rise, were not like, "Ha ha ha, I'm gonna make a camo that makes people invisible because the color palette is the same as a lot of maps." I'm sure they were just like, "Okay, this is Ember Rise, this is our South American season. We're gonna have a camo that looks like kinda like the trees and stuff, and it'll fit that scene, and it'll be really cool." I'm sure that they weren't like, "Ha ha ha, rank stars are gonna actually love this." And it's just sort of the inadvertent consequence, and for them to go back and actually, once Face It took over and make those changes, I think is a really big step in the right direction. But with that, we can,
Here,
there's
could I
an
actually say one more thing about the
yeah,
skins?
fire away, fire away.
It's just something quick. I think that it probably should have been in the game a while ago, but just assist like a setting to turn all skins off.
Yes.
That's what everyone wants.
Yeah.
That's all you
Yes.
want. Like just turn everything off. That's all I want, you know?
Even for custom games, like an observer makes a lobby and just clicks a little check mark, all of a sudden everybody's default and you have no issues at all. There's
Yeah.
nothing
I
and
I
it
understand that there might be technical limitations to how they can implement that, but that'd be really, really great to have. Really, really
yeah,
useful.
even, like, they could unlock all the operators as well for people. So, I think honestly at this point, a lot of people, especially in Collegiate, are like, "I have to buy a whole new account." It feels like so they don't wanna you don't wanna waste the money you had on your skins, and it's like, "Well, I'm just gonna buy the operators I use and just not have to ever deal with possibly forfeiting a round," just like you guys did had to, unfortunately, headless in your game. Don't wanna lose those free rounds because every point does matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of, it's funny that you bring up not having all the offs because we were in a scrim one time and I literally said I'm like, oh, we got to bring a pulse here because they're, it was, I think it was on cafe and they were doing tons of vertical play and I was like, they're not bringing an IQ, this is a free C4. And I was like, all right, I'll six to pulse. And then I was like, wait, somebody else has to do it. I don't know in pulse. It's just like, well, that's awkward. Because yeah, that's what I did. I got another account just to like completely separate everything so that I could, because I put a lot of money into skins and stuff on my main, and I was like, I just don't want to. I want to be able to switch onto that account and play ranked and have those skins and enjoy the money and the time that I put into that account. And I just got another account to play, got Face It to verify that that was fine, and it's I got the tag, so I keep and just I literally just log on and play scrims. So yeah.
Yeah. I've heard of a couple of different players doing what you were just saying, getting a separate account just to do that. And yeah, you it sucks when you don't have all the ops because you'd have to pay for all of them unless you already have an existing like Smurf to use on. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And with that, I guess we can stop talking about skins. And there's another question talking about more the difference in the levels of how you have to attack. And sort of, I'm sure attacking a pro league team or even a challenger level team is a little bit more difficult than trying to break down some of like the quote unquote lower T3 or T4 teams. Is there anything in particular you guys have had to work on very hard in order to feel comfortable breaking down the more spread out or even trying to take those positions away from people with a little bit hotter hands on their trigger fingers.
The main thing for us really has been like timing and coordination. Um, because for example, we've scrimmed DZ a couple times, and it's like if you mess something up, a Cali with a thermite, or your mistimed flashes or whatever, it's like they punish you. You do not come back from that, right? Whereas like if you're playing some lower level collegiate teams or T3 or T4 or whatever, sometimes even some challenger league teams, it's like you can get away with mistakes that usually it's not beneficial because you're like, and we usually a good team will realize like, oh, we did this wrong, we can't do that again, like we got away with it. But it's definitely one of those things where that's probably the most glaring thing for me is that you can't just sort of play the game. You can't be 5 players on a server. You have to really work together, and any sort of like anywhere you lack in chemistry and coordination, a good team that you're playing will expose that and exploit it. And yeah, the difference between T1, T2, and T3 is just sort of, I think, exponential. Because like T3 to T2, it's like you see, oh yeah, okay, they're playing with some structure. They're punishing us for our mistakes, and then you jump from T2 to T1, and it's like you don't even get a chance to think about what you'd like that. Oh, we did this wrong. It's just boom, you're already dead, or your thermite charge is gone, and you got to change your entire round or whatever, right? I could list any example, but yeah, no, it's definitely an exponential change throughout the tiers. It's not just sort of linear.
I mean, I don't really have that much to add on to. I think Spectrum got it pretty well for this. Covered it pretty well for this one. Do you have anything, Christian?
Yeah, I guess I'll just say currently right now, I believe like DZ is like one of the best like attacking teams, at least definitely in North America. But a lot of that literally just comes into like the amount of time that you sink into some of those like attacks. Obviously, we have the luxury of being in like this team house and having very lengthy practice days that some people might identify. But yeah, it just basically just depends on how much you want to sink into like each of your strategies and what that's going to look like, right? So.
Yeah, and probably having all of the backup plans and contingencies of, okay, we want to get this wall opened, but our thermite took and missed the engagement. And how are you going to necessarily swap around that? I guess on the lower level teams, if a thermite dies, that could almost be just the end of the round at that because there's no backup plans in order. And just being able to have that flexibility and the know how of anything that can happen probably eventually will happen, especially if it's going to go in the wrong way. And trying to just always fight through that sort of negative adversity and trying to just continue being consistent. And at the end of the day, Siege at its very premise is a defender sided game because you not only it's 5v5, the attackers have to do everything. If everybody just put their hands off their keyboard and did nothing, the defenders would win because they've got the little sixth man in the form of the clock always on their side, always rooting at their back, and that's something else that the defenders have to or the attackers have to fight to overcome. So when you go and talk about attacking, it's just one of those things that pretty much every single series you're going to see double 4-2 splits and anything like that. If you get 3 rounds on any map, you're feeling a lot more comfortable. So that's where the variance between high level teams are. If you're able to get those attacking rounds, that's what really is able to get the cream off of the milk, really skim and rise to the top and continue putting yourselves into really high level positions.
If I can just
But
add something else onto that, I think a great example of how punishing small mistakes at a higher level can really sort of be visible. There was, I think it was the third round of our Oregon versus LTR game that I peeked a shield in bunker as thermite and got my head ripped off. And it was like 20 seconds into the game because I was trying to throw a flash and burn the ADS for the shield. And then I kind of just said, I'm like, I told my team, I'm like, yeah, you guys kind of just gotta shove through doors because I'm like, I'm sorry, that's my bad, right? And it's like playing T3 teams or anything like that. It's like, you can quick peek a corner with a flash and throw it, and then they'll miss, right? But it's like against people like that, it's like you don't get those opportunities. And unfortunately, like we were coordinated enough to win the round and sort of and like make do with what we had. But there are times where if you're not playing, especially in collegiate as well, it's like I remember very vividly rounds where it's like if there was like hard breacher bans or like a Thatcher Maverick ban on certain maps, and it's like you pick the Thermite or the Habana, and you're just like, well, we won the round because you already know that they're not going to be coordinated enough, and unless we throw super hard, like there's no way that we're going to lose that round, right? So it's one of those things where I think that probably is a vivid example of uh, that sort of punishment at a high level, right? Obviously not the highest level, but um, yeah, it's definitely a good example of that.
So I guess we can shift on again towards your motivations as players. Necessarily, what made you want to get to the level, like what sort of drive and fire is within you, as well as if there's anybody you look up to or any like role models or leaders that have helped you get to the areas you are, or even like what's your biggest dream towards that you're fighting? Do you want to get to Atlanta? And do you want to lift that hammer, which is probably what a lot of you guys have your sights set on? If you guys just each wanted to go into those.
Um, yeah, so I really like I'm a very competitive person, right? I'm I played soccer at a high level for a long time, and I ended up getting a knee injury that caused me to sort of stop because it was just I just my physiotherapist was like, "Yeah, you shouldn't do this anymore," and I was like, "Okay, it's probably not a good idea." And then I sort of said, "Hey, Siege is kind of cool," and I just went in full like I took that in stride, and that sort of like it carried over very well. But and that's probably just always wanting to be better and always wanting to learn. It was something that I was very fortunate through like high level soccer is that I ended up having really good coaches a lot of the time, and they really left an impression on me on how to improve, right? Always be asking questions, always be thinking about how you played, always be thinking about like your positioning and how you could have done something better. And I think that really helped me throughout Siege, and it drove me to be a lot better. Um, and like, because I'm not the most mechanically skilled player, that's why I put myself on Thermite. But like, I I understand the game, so I'm the IGL, the primary IGL for my team, and I just sort of I play chess while they shoot their guns, right? So it's like it's one of those things where I'm just fortunate that I pushed myself to understand the game better to make up for my lack of mechanical skill, so to speak, right? Um, and I guess role model, Foxe, Canadian player, right? I met him in the second inaugural Canada Nationals. I think at that point they were the Canada Nationals, not just like a smaller group. It was officially Ubisoft sponsored, but we played him in qualifiers and got smacked when he was playing for Team Canada. And then he made it. I think he made his return to Pro League on Cloud9. And ever since it was just sort of like I saw him and I was like, yeah, a Canadian player can do that. They can be at the top. They can do these things. It's like if Cloud9 wasn't necessarily at the top, but it Pro League is the top, right? It's the best 8 teams in the region. So I don't know. Like I just saw that and I was like, okay, I can do that, right? And that's what I wanted to do. And I think my goal and what I'm working towards right now is basically just getting there because obviously there's a lot of competitive like disparity between the Canada division and the US division, obviously just because player pool difference, right? See, a lot of these players in the US have tons and tons of competitive experience, right? And they've been playing the game for a long period of time and have this exposure, and we're not quite there yet. And I want to get to that level, and I think that's my immediate goal of just building a rep for the scene, building as a team and as players, and just improving uh, and eventually, I would like to make Invite. Whether I went this last year as a spectator, and it was amazing. It was a great experience, and I think that playing on that stage would be amazing. Do I expect myself to win? I don't think so. But I just don't think so. I don't think I'm good enough personally. Um, but and I don't think I have the exposure to. Eventually, maybe. But I just think that I want to be there. I want to get that experience at some point before I dip out of competitive Siege and finish my studies and stuff. I think that's sort of the end goal.
For myself, I don't have any like deep motivations. It's more or less like a love of the game and wanting to improve, like Spectrum was saying. And the only way that you can improve is facing higher and higher level opponents. You got to get smacked by people better than you to become better. And the only way to go about that is from going from T4 to T3 to T2 to T1. Obviously, not there yet, but that's the whole point of the grind. And uh, I would say for role models or leaders, I can't really name one specific one, but like Spectrum was saying, Foxy is a really good example of a Canadian player who made it to the top. Uh, I can't really think of any other specific examples, but there's a lot of pro players that really like set the example of what a pro player should be in whatever region, US, Canada, LATAM, Europe, APAC. There's good examples in every scene. And what I'm working towards, I would say, is well, end goal uh would be NAPL, but most recent goal or closest goal would be to get to the promotions slash relegations for CAPL, CACL in the end of stage two, I believe. I think that's around like the end of
It's I think
September.
it's in December actually. Stage 2
Oh
ends
wait,
and
yeah, yeah,
then
you're right,
yeah,
you're
I
right. It's
believe
December 13th, I think.
there's supposed to be the major quote unquote but
Yeah,
COVID said we're not going to do that. So
yeah,
yeah, I believe it's in December that's when the relegations are.
yeah,
So
yeah. Sorry, the end of stage two is September,
yeah.
the end of September, and then you're right. Yeah, I think it was December 13th for that.
I think that number's right. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, that's my motivations. That's what I was thinking about this. What about you, Christian?
Yeah, so like I said before, I worked with really small teams in the past, and obviously I've kind of went the same route that you guys have gone through the collegiate circuit and the CL circuit and all that stuff. Like I remember still having to study and like do like qualifiers and analyze other teams within those qualifiers. So I guess now heading into like Siege, I remember my first drive coming into the team house actually, like just to visit. Um, I didn't really know many of the players, like any of the histories. Obviously, I knew like EG, I knew BK and BC. But I remember I was watching a podcast that one of my friends had did with Mint actually, interviewing him, and I just kind of wanted to know like what I was getting into, like just heading into the house, like obviously Mint is our captain, so I like went straight for him, see exactly what he knew about the game, what he thought. And obviously, I learned a lot like about Flipside, and then his time on Dark Zero, as well as SK, all that stuff. But I was in a super fortunate position where I had at the time, like the best North American coach in BKN, and then obviously now he's obviously working within the org, and I still see him every single day. I still have Mint as my captain. I still look up to him quite a bit. And then of course now we have BC as our head coach. So that's quite the powerhouse of staff. So I can always look up to those guys, and they can definitely show me the light. Um, in terms of what made me want to get to this level, so I guess let me go back full circle. Since I've already kind of went through this process of analyzing teams within the qualifiers and all things like that, I recognize that no matter what tier I was in, at the end of the day, these pro players are human after all, and there is like a psychological aspect of the game that can be dissected. And so I kind of look to apply that, whether it be whatever game I'm doing or whatever tier that I'm in. I wanted to just carry that with me throughout the entirety of my career. I always felt like I get better at it and things like that. As far as I guess now, what I'm looking to work towards, I'd say my biggest motivating factor is trying to build the perfect esports program. Uh, Basically, Brandon has this perfect vision of the program, and I have a lot of sports elements that I try to fit within that. And I think whenever we kind of combine that power together, it seems like we could build something quite literally perfect within esports. So that's kind of what we're working towards.
If you don't mind me asking, what's your major at Texas A&M?
Mathematics.
Okay, so that's where you get the nice
Smart
analytical
guy.
stuff
Yeah.
coming from. I guess does everybody want to say their major real quick? Shout out. Maybe I guess we could tie that into how you could relate it to Siege possibly if you're able to do that.
Um, I am a molecular biology and biochemistry major, so that doesn't really apply very much, but yeah.
The
I'm
brain
a
comes through.
Yeah.
yeah. I'm a computer engineering major, and I don't really know how that relates besides computers.
Mhm.
You play Siege on a computer, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it could be like the logic, I guess you could apply with your
That's fair.
hardware as opposed to software, right? Are you
Yeah, hardware.
yeah.
Computer, you can like specialize, but mine is more specialized towards hardware. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you have to think about how things work together. I guess if you think then you could apply that to your team. I'm a mechanical
Yep.
engineer, so it's just kind of like, okay, I logic, engineering logic, sure. I guess that
Surrounded by
relates.
math geniuses.
Hey, you're a little bit better than chemistry than me. I started off wanting to go into biomedical and then can't do the chemistry, so I switched to mechanical. So
Yeah.
you got me there.
Chemistry is my weakest as well. Did not do that
Yeah.
well in my last
I went to
chemistry course.
I went to A&M majoring in chemistry, and I got out of that real fast. So.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
not for everybody.
Well, I guess while we're talking about course load, probably the biggest thing for you guys would be the balance of having a very rich competitive siege life that takes up a lot of time, as well as us all being college students and trying to find that balance. If you want to share any stories or insight to how you had to struggle with that kind of stuff?
Um, yeah, well, so I'm taking OChem online for my summer, and it was bad. It's a bad decision. Um, I originally wanted to take it because the prof was way better, and then I just sort of said, yeah, whatever, it's okay, I can do it online. No, no, I cannot. It's horrible. But the funniest thing I think though that almost happened was I thought that so if we played our game the first week of CAPL and not the second week, I would have had to be doing an online lab during the Pro League match. Like, because you can't miss any of them. There's only like 6 of them throughout the semester, and they were biweekly, and like you can't if you miss one, you fail the course. And I was like, well, that's not good. So I can't just be like, yeah, I got a pro league game for a video game. Can't do that. Because my prof would not understand. He's very old. Um, but yeah, no, I it was that was probably the most recent sort of funny, interesting story. But I definitely think that I like for fall, I'm looking to reduce my course load. I was taking like 4 courses in a lab, 5 courses and two like I last my last semester I took 4 courses, 2 labs, and the one before that I took 4 courses in a lab, and it was just like it was fine. You know, it's doable. That's on track to complete my my major in 4 years. But I found that if when when I'm splitting my time between a social life, between playing games just as a hobby, between competing, between all of that, it was hard, right? It was hard to sort of keep on track of everything and not give myself burnout. Plus, also, I have a job. I only work part time, but still, it's just another thing to add on top of it. So I think that I'm definitely looking to reduce my course load now that I'm in. I don't want to stop because I don't think that that's good. I want to just sort of keep going and keep refreshing my memory and keep learning. But I want to reduce my course load for sure because I have found that you know it's especially with online, but even in person, it's very stressful to be paying all of this money to go to school and then having to split your time and seeing either grades slip or seeing your motivation slip or whatever just because you have so much on your plate, right? Yeah, it's just it's kind of tough, but learning experience. So
Yeah, I agree with the like idea of balancing your work and your commitment to Siege and all of that. It's I agree that you should uh, I don't know. I think that a reduced course load would be beneficial to you if you were serious about pursuing Siege. And that like I would say that that would only really work if this is what you really really want, cuz it's not worth it to detract from your academic career to pursue a siege career if that's not what you really want, like deep down, you know. And I myself went down my program goes, I think it was 6 or 5 courses a semester. That is the normal. And last semester I did 5, and I was playing siege and like playing a bit like on teams, and it wasn't working out well. And I think that going down to 4 or 3 and doing summer for like 4 or 3 as well, I think that that would be a good alternative. This summer, actually, I was taking some courses as well, probability and statistics, and a logic course. I forget what the title of it was, but it's just logic. Both math courses, and trying to balance that and Siege, even though it's only 2 courses plus a social life, it was rough. And I think that I don't really have any tips on how to balance it, but you really just got to think about what you can do yourself and how you can manage it. Can you manage a certain amount of courses plus a certain amount of practice time plus having time to hang out with friends to like, or even time to yourself, because you should factor that in as well, like some free time to just do whatever, sit there and watch YouTube, you know. uh but yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Right. For me, I'm taking 2 summer courses right now, 2 10-week courses, and it was advised to me to not take one of the courses. It's I forget what it's called. It's like uh mathematical analysis or like something like that, like advanced calculus, like the basically the hardest math course or whatever that is on my degree plan. So taking that alongside a probability course. I guess I will say in terms of the job here, it feels like I have to give 150% to be fully like invested in the job. However, with school right now, even like I feel like if I were to give 100% like towards Siege, I would still be struggling in one of those aspects, whether it be school or whether it be like, just work here with the team. So that's kind of what I have to balance. I guess that's all I got for that.
Yeah, it's like sort of building into the principle of if you ever heard in high school, if you were like playing a sport such as Becky was playing soccer, it's like you're a student athlete. I guess if you want to apply the term to athletes in esports as well, it's like the student comes first. At the end of the day, I don't know if there's necessarily as big of a player pool, probably watching the stream or listening to it, that knows like I'm gonna get to the top and me playing Siege is gonna pay the bills for the rest of my life. I'm not gonna have to do anything else. I'm gonna be salaried. I'm gonna have a contract and all of those things. But it's also like when people go for collegiate, like D1 sports and whatever, it's you still want to get your degree because that's going to be the rest of your life. And you have to also try to prioritize those kind of things with your motivation as well. Sure, you might love Siege, but is it necessarily something you can live the rest of your life on? Like, I like casting, I like doing all of this stuff, but am I going to be an NAL caster like Kixer and Taro that's getting contracted and flown out to Vegas to cast? Probably not. It's at the end of the day kind of a hobby, but I was taking dynamics and a statistics course at the same time while trying to help cast over at ESA doing like 2 or 3 best of 3s every week and doing those classes, and it was not fun. It was definitely rough. It was wake up, be in 2 Zoom calls, grind homework, grind siege and casting, and then rinse and repeat, and trying to find where exactly you wanna have that level of I want to go to sleep before midnight. So what do I have to do that? I want to go to sleep before 2 a.m. Where do I have to do that? And finding that key balance comes with a lot of scheduling, and it's also going to come from experience. If anybody's coming up into college now, any young players that are coming in trying to get their roots into collegiate, it is definitely not the easiest thing to find, especially because you might just want to throw yourself fully in. I know when I first came into college, having high school experience where classes weren't necessarily that hard and I could get by, didn't have to study, didn't have to do anything like that. Going straight into like 15 or 18 credit hours where if you don't read your chapters on some of the classes, you're not going to do well. You're not going to know what's going on in class. And playing that catch up game is a very difficult position that you don't want to be in. And you really do have to actually plan out your schedule. Even if you go on an to an extreme example, going on an hourly schedule of I'm going to set out blocks here of this time I'm going to wake up here, go to breakfast, I go to class here, then I have like 2 hours in between this class. I want to work on homework for my English class during this time on Mondays. Then on Tuesdays I have a 3-hour block here. Let's have it if I have a calculus assignment, let's just do that. Getting any sort of planning like that is definitely very beneficial. I'm sure that that directly can apply to Siege as well, having those carved out time blocks and not really trying to overspread yourself to all of these different commitments that collegiate people have to try to spread in, as well as like each of you guys touched up on having time for yourself. Because if you're just completely run down all the time, mental health is a gigantic factor that you need to always have in the back of your head. Because especially with how stressful everything is in life at this current moment, you really do need to make sure that you're always at a good place in the old noggin.
Yeah, I don't know if people realize how much I guess work. Like I think my teammates are in chat maybe, and they were actually giving me a little bit of flack that like they haven't seen me in like 2 weeks or I haven't left my room in 2 weeks. But yeah, I just don't think people will realize exactly what that entails, like balancing school with Siege.
Yeah, it's something easier said than done. It's like, "Oh, yes, just find balance." A little bit harder to do than you
Hmm.
think.
Yeah, for a lot of things, let's say you have like 5 things going on in your life. Let's say siege, school, social life, personal stuff, and sleep. You can't you can't get them all perfect. You're gonna
Yeah.
lack in one of them. That's you can't put all your attention into every single little bit of every single one of them. Something is
Y
gonna end up lacking at the end.
For me, it's always sleep. Sleep always lacks.
Yeah.
But we went ahead and already touched on a little bit of the differences between your steps up from collegiate to the higher levels. I guess we could go a little bit more in depth of what necessarily was the most drastic difference you've noticed. Like, what really slapped you in the face and surprised you as you took a step up?
Uh Practicing. Throughout collegiate, we kind of like we only prepped for a few teams, Akron to name one, right? We didn't do a lot of prep. We kind of just showed up and played for our matches. Um and then going into qualifiers, like starting to scrim for qualifiers and putting in these extra hours, it was like, you know, we only scrim 4 times a week or so because, you know, everyone's got work and everyone's got other commitments and it's kind of all that we can fit in, which is unfortunate, right? But that's just life. And I think that it's one of those things where even putting in that amount of time and realizing how much time you have to put in is like, because you know, you always realize you're like, oh, if you're at the top, you got to practice so much. You got to, you know, you got to always be practicing. You got to be always trying to improve your game. But it's like until you're there, you don't actually sort of get the wake up call of like, oh wow, like if you miss 2 or 3 days and then come back to practice, you realize just how much you actually miss. And it's one of those things that I'm looking forward to, of this, like, of our scene growing in the Canada division, because it means, you know, more money into the scene. It means more dedicated orgs. It means like it just means improvement for everybody, right? Because it's like if the better that the conditions are for the players, the better they'll play, right? And I think I envy a lot. I envy Dark Zero a lot, really, because it's like I watched the new like documentary series. The It's like I see that and I see the team house and I see the environment and I'm like, what? Like I couldn't even imagine, right? And it's just it's crazy how like what the top like looks like, and it's just that's probably the biggest difference, is just the how much effort people have to put into to stay at the top and to, you know, to grind. Because in collegiate, like I said, it's like we were fortunate to be skilled enough players that most of our matchups we kind of just ran defaults or pugged through our games, and then, you know, when we actually ran into an opponent, we were like, okay, these guys are actually coordinated and work and played quote unquote real siege, not to be mean to anybody, but like Akron, we got slammed by them in the finals of my first collegiate season, and then we said, okay, we're actually going to prep for these guys, and we scrimmed and we VOD reviewed and everything, and then they didn't stand a chance, right? So yeah, I think that was the only exposure that we had to practicing and prepping for teams and stuff, and it's now it's like it's a necessary thing. It's not just we can show up and kind of wing it, right?
Yeah, I agree. A lot of my experience in the collegiate scene with York, I was only in there for 1 season though. But a lot of it, we didn't have to prep. We could just pug it, and I think that some of that is based off of like just initial like chemistry and like coordination that we had together. But like I find that in uh, CACL, for us at least, that you have to practice a bit to verse the teams. Like Spectrum was saying, like sort of playing like real Siege. You know, like that's a weird way to put it, but Siege that's coordinated and structured around strats and reviewing, and not just running in there and like knowing the general default and like how to do things like generally, like more specific things to like target specific strats, to counter specific strats. Um, and I think that like for our practices, at least, I actually have my schedule open right now. Currently, because of like people's obligations, like people's scheduling themselves, I think we have, I think it's 2 dry run days, 3 scrim days, and 2 days off. And what's it called? Those dry run days, we specifically just go through strats, go through VOD review, and generally talk about the day before, uh, where we scrimmed, or the day, like the next day, what we're going to be doing and what we're going to be improving from the last time. And then the scrims, just regular structured 3 map scrims. And then I think the day off is important as well because of the whole balance thing that we were talking about in the last topic. Uh, but yeah, I think that there's a big difference between collegiate and higher level of play in the amount of prep that you have to do for other teams.
Right. I guess one thing to touch on is you obviously mentioned the amount of resources that we have here. I do think that there's a little bit of maintenance that teams don't really realize what they can do to improve, regardless of like having a team house, like doing things that are a little bit more tangible. And scouting is one of those things. Obviously something that you guys touched on, prep work. That was something that turned around our season at A&M. Was I remember in the playoffs, I believe that was top 8, which is what we had just achieved last season. So now we needed to move even further from that. There was a team that we were facing at the time, which I don't remember exactly which one it was. But we kind of knew their play style. We watched so many of their games. We actually did that for every team heading into the playoffs. We scouted every team. We understood their play style, their strategies, what they like to do. And teams, I mean, one thing that you could take advantage of at the lower tiers is that teams really don't have the ability to create new strats or kind of diversify their play. It's pretty standardized, and you know exactly what to expect when you see it once. Obviously, now when you face teams like SSG or whatever, they're not exactly going to hit you with the same thing twice. So that's something that you kind of have to watch out for. I know a lot of teams kind of say the same thing about us. Whenever we play them in a matchup, we have something completely new that they haven't seen before. So yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. But it's like even if lower tier teams put a little bit of effort into whether it be scouting or diversifying their play, that it just improves their overall like stance within their tier immensely.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's you aren't gonna understand fully to the extent of how stretched out for time you are. And it's like you also aren't gonna know until you're there. Like you said, it's like you can just kind of fly by the seat of your pants all the way through collegiate if you have enough raw mechanical skill. Then when you meet other people that have the raw mechanical skill that also have the game sense and the knowledge and the structure, it's just gonna kinda surprise you a little bit and cause you to have to really elevate your game to the next level, and with that, you also put in the necessary time in order to build yourself up to that. But we also had another question in chat for more individual practice. Is there anything you guys necessarily do for mechanical aim? Probably more towards the 2 players. Anything you use, maybe like Kovac, a lot of T-Hunt, any of those kind of things to help you out?
Um, Maybe this is why I suck at the game, but I don't do like any outside like aim training other than in Siege. I T hunt, right? Like I feel that it's much more valuable to get like in engine in game like practice with how everything sort of feels when you're actually playing the game. Um, I think that's much more valuable. And also like there have been nights where it's like I'm sitting there, I'm like, I can't sleep. I'm gonna go T hunt, and I just crank music and T hunt for hours and on hours on hours, and it's just something I do like mindlessly, and it builds muscle memory, and it's something that's really. I also spent like a week or so fine tuning my sense and changing like my multiplier to get like I play like 83, 83, 83, which ends up being somewhere around like 99 on regular, but I play with a weird multiplier. So, but I fine tuned it just specifically to like my mouse pad to my mouse and everything. So it's comfortable for me. And that's like the most, like I don't know. I do that. I T hunt, right? I've been playing on the same sense for a year now. And it's just, I feel like if you switch up a lot, it's not really the best thing to do, but at the same time, like just get used to playing in game is mainly what I focus on, right? Because it's like if I wanted to go play, I know a lot of my friends play Osu, right? And it builds their sort of their tracking and their reaction time, and I just never really understood it. Like I get it, it's practice, of course, but I would much rather put that extra time into actually like into siege, right? Like tea hunting specifically, or even just like tea hunting is kind of weird because it's technically on land because it's not a server. So a lot of the times I will just like I'll tea hunt for an hour and then I'll go play unranked for an hour and I'll just like I won't really yeah, I won't play to win. I'll play to practice online Siege, right? Because I can't remember who tweeted. I think it was Skies. He tweeted out like a clip from the match where he was holding an angle on Clubhouse and died without even seeing the person. And it's just like, what are you gonna do about that, right? That's just online Siege, and it's tough. But it's like there's the big difference between like tea hunting for 3 hours and then going, you know, even in a casual and then being like, wow, this feels so much different because it does. So I think that yeah, most of my time does sink into Siege specifically, and nothing else.
Yeah. I think that what he was saying about playing and practicing in engine is really important. And things like Kovacs and other aim trainers can try and simulate it, but they won't really get it exact how it feels to play in Siege. Even like the changes in FPS when you're moving, when you're playing, the movement of the game, leaning, they can't get it perfect. And actually playing in engine is really useful. But as for like aim trainers myself, I do use an aim trainer. It's not a paid one; it's a free one, and it's not the best. But I think that it doesn't help my aim so much as it helps my arm warm up to like what to like playing. Like I use T Hunt to actually practice my siege aim, but I use the aim trainer to warm up my arm to practice. It sounds weird, but it's like the warm up to the warm up almost, you know? And uh the aim trainer, it's a browser actually. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. It's called Aiming Pro. Just it's in my bookmarks. I just looked it up. It's if you try it, it's not the best. It has some FPS issues sometimes, but I like it. I think that it helps me warm up, and I think besides practicing in engine, I, I don't think there's really much you can do because sure you can click all those little dots on an aim trainer, and sure you're accurate with that, but that doesn't make you accurate with recoil. That doesn't make you accurate with angles, with leaning into the shot instead of like actually just standing there statically or even like strafing and just shooting in an aim trainer. I don't think it's the same sort of feeling, same sort of practice that you would get, like Spectrum was saying.
Right. I guess I could add a little bit to this actually. So some of the guys here, they'll just do T hunt. Some will do aim trainer, and then some will do both. Obviously, right? Most of the time, it's you do both. I guess the aim training that I would recommend, there's one called Aim Lab. That one's free, I believe. So definitely check that one out. Kovacs is, I believe, like $5 or something. Kovacs Aim Trainer. My collegiate teammates actually swore by that one. So um, I would check out both those. And then I know BC used to use Aim Hero, I believe, which is another paid one. So I think if you do like a combination of those, you'll kind of start to identify like some of those drills and do some of those. Obviously, I'm a sports guy, so I truly believe in drills. However, some will just do T hunt, which T hunt is great, for doing the just kind of traversing the maps and understanding like the angles, all those fights where it's going to come from. So there's obviously benefits to all those. In terms of continuing to improve your play, even beyond just like aim, I think something that people don't really do is analyze their own VODs. I know basically back whenever I was actually like serious about improving as a player, one thing that you'd be forced to do is basically just watch your own VODs, and I would force myself to even stream. This was like way back in Xbox. I would force myself to stream on Xbox, and I would download my bot or whatever and just watch my own gameplay. And obviously you kind of experience very emotional things like tilt, or maybe your teammates are not communicating and you're just getting upset or whatever. So it's really difficult to kind of understand what you're doing well and what you're doing right. But if you kind of isolate that video and just spit it back out to yourself, and it's really really hard to assess your own gameplay because you have to be very very critical, and you don't like admitting that you're wrong like ever. But whenever you're watching your gameplay and you're like, you're doing a decision in the game and now you're isolating it and you're like, was this the right decision? It's like it was terrible, it was a horrible decision. You don't really like to admit that, but at the end of the day, that is what makes you like a better player overall, whether it be your positioning, where your crosshair placement is, or even just like your movement.
Yeah, it's like that principle in Siege of sure you can like break it down to a simple principle. Why did I die? I died because this guy got the headshot and I didn't. But when you have to go to the higher level, why did I not get my headshot? It's most likely going to boil down to you either put yourself into a position where the other player had the better angle. So why did you think that swing that? What are you going to do next time to make sure that, and really learning from your mistakes at the highest level is going to be something that you sort of can't build with any aim trainer. That's why Siege is so very, very different. It's hard also to emulate the recoil patterns and how different sight pictures impact how you're going to take different angles, as well as leaning. I know, like, there's people that have the aim trainers that are built directly into CS:GO, and so, okay, you can go spray at a wall and make sure that your bullets are in a very tight spread, as well as there's some that, like, bots are just sprinting around and actually moving and jumping and helping you track with that. Each kinda only has T-Hunt, and so getting that in-game engine experience is really important. That's why a lot of people have a lot of T-Hunt hours, but to a certain extent, you still just also have to play the game in order to get the feel, and just because leaning as a mechanic is pretty much unique to Siege, not a whole lot of other games use it at as much of a level as Siege does. You really do just gotta get in there and do the unglorious thing that is just grinding until you feel really good with your mechanical skills. But then what you were talking about with your sort of game sense and trying to build that, that's also only going to go through repetition and being critical and thinking at a higher level of why did I do this? Why did I do it wrong? And what am I going to do next time to build that up? But I guess another point we can go to was, did any of you guys have any major, like, nervousness or shakes in your first game going to the biggest level and stuff like that, and trying to isolate out? Maybe we can get some funny stories with that topic.
Yeah, for sure. I throughout qualifiers, it wasn't like there wasn't a lot of stress, right? Because we were just like, ah, whatever, we're just doing it, right? But we showed up in the TeamSpeak on the server for our first match on Oregon against LTR, and I was just like, I I was like speechless, and it's like it's really hard for me because um I'm a very emotional player, right? Like, and it's something that I have to work on a lot, and have been working on a lot. But as the IGL, it's like I've noticed that there are times when it's like my mental will get to me and affect, like, not necessarily my gameplay, but more so my comms and my ability to play chess, right? But and we so for a specific example, our warm up scrim before the LTR match was on Oregon, and we got slammed, like smacked. We played a Mexican division team, and we just got destroyed. Like, they were pulling in things that we had never seen before, and my teammates said that it didn't really affect them, but for me, it's like I felt like I wasn't adapting enough. I felt like I wasn't controlling the team enough, and I wasn't doing a good enough job. And so I was down on myself going into that match, which is obviously, like, it showed. We didn't play that individually. We didn't play that great. Omega had a great performance on 60 hertz, might I add. Um, 60 hertz playing Cali, like, come on. But no, I think that the vibes were definitely off because a lot of people were, for the first few rounds we were kind of nervous, but we kind of got over it, and it was just like there was just a we were all kind of out of sync is what the main thing. It wasn't necessarily nerves, it was more so um like we just kind of we hadn't been put under the pressure of actually being in, like, on the server in a map, right? So, and I think that we had tried to do that before because, obviously playing structured 6-6 scrims, you play 6 rounds on either side no matter what. And I think that we had tried for a bit to get like match day style scrims to put ourselves under that pressure, and it worked for a while. Like, we were feeling really confident, and then we started to get actual, like, grind and practice in for like just practicing strats and practicing maps and etc. And we stopped doing match day scrims, and I think that really would have helped us going into that first match. But yeah, I think it was nerves for a bit, and then just like lack of experience for the rest of it, I would say.
Yeah, I sort of had a similar feeling when we first joined the TeamSpeak server on the first game day of CACL. It was CAPL for Spectrum, but um, I'd never used TeamSpeak before, and I know a lot of my teammates had never used TeamSpeak. We usually just stuck to Discord, even though TeamSpeak's better. um, and what's it called? Um, it was a new environment. It was weird, and we had a lot of pressure on us because we were facing a team that there was actually a poll. There's a Rainbow Six CL Twitter account, the unofficial account, and there was a poll, and it said, "Who do you think is gonna win? This team or this team? Like my team or the other team, Valor's, right?" And I think or no, it wasn't a poll beforehand. It was a poll afterwards, and it was which were you most surprised by? That's what it was. And there were four options. Which win were you most surprised by? and I think we had 50% of the votes out of the four options, and it really like brought into a sort of more nervousness for the next one even, that like we have to sort of like keep it up, or else I don't know, or else we'll keep that sort of reputation, because people knew who the other teams were and they didn't really know who we were, and uh sort of like making your first like couple games into the scene, it it's nervous. You get nervous because this is what you're showing people that you are. This is their first impression of you, and uh, I don't know. Yeah, it gives you a bit of nervousness when you first start. But I think that in our most recent game, which was not the best performance, I think that a lot of us sort of had the shakes a bit. We weren't performing. I think we just got more nervous after the game started progressing, because I'm pretty sure on we brought it back pretty close. I think it was like 7-5 final score, but it was also on Oregon. Uh, I think we were down 5-1 on defense, and it's hard to come back from that because you get that nervousness. They only need two more rounds to close it out, and we started to bring it back, but that nervousness just keeps building and building and building, and you can't really shake it until you've cleared the map. But yeah, that's my take on it.
I guess for me, so if anybody is from Collegiate R6 watching,
Mhm.
obviously they kind of see me like just cast from my bedroom or whatever. But I guess the first event that I went to was Raleigh, and I just remember, I was with my team, so I was pretty relaxed in that environment. But I remember going down like this like escalator into like the players lobby, and it's just like, oh look, there's Empire, there's like all these teams or whatever, and it's just like, holy crap, I'm standing next to Empire or whatever, next to Shaz, next to Sua, like the biggest names in Siege possible. But it wasn't even nervousness. It was as soon as I arrived, I was like, I'm here. Like I'm actually just I'm alongside the rest of like the pro league, the global pro league, some of the best teams in the world. So I think once you kind of put things into perspective, like as you're just like continuing to ascend, and like you guys are obviously in Canadian Pro League and Canadian like Challenger League, like that's not an easy feat, right? You had to grind your way through the process and kind of get to where you were. So I think you guys could definitely be more like more confident in your play as well. Like I'm sure you guys feel awesome, just being in the spots that you're in. But yeah, you kind of get over nerves pretty fast. I remember the first time that I ended up coming to the house here is it was a little daunting. First of all, like BKN he's 6 foot 6'2", 6'4", whatever. He was just huge. He was bigger than I was expecting him to be. At the time, Jarvis is on the team, and he's also extremely tall. He's like 6'4". It was just like I was just looking up like this. So that was pretty intimidating. But you kind of just realize like you're just along for the ride, right?
Yeah, it's like everybody's human at the end of the day. Like you might be meeting your quote unquote idols and people you look up to, but you might not necessarily have to physically look up to them unless they're 6'4", like you had to. But
They were huge.
yeah, everybody's human and everybody is in this exact same position as you. They're also sitting at their computers about to play the same game you're in. And that's exactly is where like the mental aspect of Siege is. I think that's one of the coolest things about the game is it isn't just necessarily mechanical skill. It's one of those things that sure you might have better aim than the person, but you can still win gunfights if you're confident enough in how you're setting yourselves up and being a lot more intelligent. And I guess nerves really can really factor into that. As also like what you said earlier when you were down 5-1 on Oregon, it's like having your backs against the wall is either you're gonna crumble or one of my favorite phrases is pressure makes diamonds, because that's also not only like the typical saying, but I guess you're gonna be under pressure if you're trying on your ranked grind to hit diamond rank and really prove yourself that way. But with those sort of things, like trying to get over the initial nerves, I think my first cast, I was a little bit nervous, but I had Loaf, who I think is in chat. Wonderful, wonderful woman there to, right after the cast, rip me apart a little bit and tell me exactly what I did wrong, but in a constructive way that did help. But just trying to continue pushing through any sort of nerves you have, it's just sort of realizing that it's not as daunting of a task as you might have initially thought, and just you do eventually get over it, and going to the highest stage and being able to get over that is a feat in itself. So, definitely big ups to all of you guys for continuing through with that. But I guess we can go to another question. There's one specifically for you, Christian, of what advice would you want to give somebody that wants to go into the T1, T2 analyst scene? Is there any
Mhm.
like specific tips or tricks you would do with their networking or how to prove themselves?
Yeah, for me, whenever I started doing analysis work for a siege team, it was a small org and a small team. Hadn't even made Challenger League yet. But it was mostly just about like showing dedication, I guess. Like back then, all I did was create like some spreadsheets for a team, tracking like their stats and stuff. Um, and at from there, it kind of improved into like, okay, like now we want you like as a coach or whatever, and then continue to advance from there. In terms of how someone wants to be like a tier one or tier two analyst, I guess one thing is identifying the need that the team's needs, whether it be like stats, like if you notice like a team doesn't have an analyst or something, you can kind of assert yourself into that role, but you also need to do it well, right? You can't just be like, hey, like let me track stats for you or whatever. You kind of have to know going into it what is going to help a team and what is not. Um, I think I see another. Yeah, there's another question about like networking or whatever. Just for like, I guess for um, just to understand like my side of things. Like whenever I submitted my application to Jordan to begin, I didn't know like a single person in Pro League. I knew Intero, and that was basically it. But I didn't even like reference him. He didn't refer me to Jordan or anything like that. I think in that situation, it was this team was located in Houston, and so Dark Zero immediately became my favorite org just because it was local for my hometown. So whenever the application process came around, I basically just there was something about like wanting to be a Houstonian org, and that drew me to them. And so I think hopefully, I don't know if Jordan will tell you the same, but in my application, it kind of it mirrored that. It basically showed everything that I believed in, and it went through to the application. So I'm trying to think of like the best advice I could give. It's mostly just about being like dedicated and willing to do things that other people are not.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, the analyst work could almost be like the grunge, unglorious work of sure you
Right.
have the players that are on the stage, they're the ones getting the frags. You're sort of like the back supporting cast, the behind the scenes that not
Yeah,
necessarily everybody wants to do, but if you're
it's
good
definitely
at it,
about
like
being it was sorry. It's definitely about being flexible as well because on my time on the team, like I've been here for like 1.5 years, and some people might like look at like Dark Zero. We've had a lot of like roster turnover or whatever, and be like, okay, why is like he's still standing? I think there's just something to say about like the amount of like flexibility that I've absolutely needed with the job. Like some days it's like I remember whenever I first started, it's like okay, you got to do these scouting reports and like kind of do like heat maps of where like players are located and where they're pathing and stuff like that. And just along with the job, we kind of started to realize like what is necessary, what is not necessary, what's like supplemental, and like not really what like the team needs. It's just about growing with the team, and I've kind of done that every step of the way. And like now we're like at this even bigger task where I had to grow once more, kind of transitioning from part time to full time. And it's literally just like being up for the job. It's like I just gotta do that stuff. Super flexible.
yeah, and I guess we can flip that also onto the player side as well. Is there any like glaringly obvious or big tips that you guys had in specifics to trying to get to where you are, as well as maybe trying to find the right group of people? Maybe after that transition to trying to get noticed by something like an org or anything like that, if you have a pre existing team that's trying to rise up and have any sort of backing to help that.
Sorry, I'm reading the chat, so like people are like critiquing me, something like that. Talking about my oh.
Yeah, your cam, you got Thanos snapped. You were very
Is it
OBS. You
fixed
just
now?
had some. Yeah, it's all good now. You're all good.
Okay. Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
I was saying, like, just flipping the question to the player side of any
Okay.
tips for them as well. Maybe, like, how did you guys find if there's any tips for them, any avenues that you know specifically to maybe find a group of 5 people that are similarly minded, or even how you guys got noticed by orgs or anything like that?
Yeah, I think probably my biggest thing is like if you've ever run into me in ranked, you know that I have quite a bit of an ego on me. And like I don't really it's almost like it's more sort of like a persona. Like I don't try to be, uh, I don't try to specifically ego people and talk shit. Oh, sorry, um, all the time. But like, it's just something that I'm competitive, right? Like I would be chirping at people and when I'm playing soccer on the field, I would be chirping at them all the time, and like they know it's just it. I would go congratulate them afterwards because if they played a great game, like it's not that I'm like a hateful person. It's just, it's just talk, right? And I think that the biggest difference is be humble, right? A lot of people get be like, oh, they have if as soon as they get the taste of spotlight or any sort of large following, ego will follow, right? And I think with finding an org with either 'cause for our situation, we had to reach out a lot, right? We had a couple people come to us, but we had to reach out a lot for our cases, and it was a lot of just like uh humbling, right? Just being like, hey, this is us, this is what we have achieved, we're looking for this, we're willing, this is our greatest strengths, this is what we feel like we're trying to improve on now, we would love the support, blah blah blah, like just all the regular talk, so I think that just the sort of the humbling is a big difference. You have to make sure that you stay very level-headed and stay, um, I don't know, being sort of like realistic with yourself, right? Because you can't just go in and be and messes at SSG and be like, "Yo, we're a new team. We have more young talent than all of your players. Pick us up." Right? It's not gonna be something like that. And I think sort of like as you network and as you gain a following and as you gain exposure, it's all about like how you handle it. So, because anybody can, not anybody, but a lot of people are talented enough mechanically to you know play against a lot of these top people. But the difference is whether you can work with your teammates, whether you can work with staff, whether you can whether you can be a what's the word, whether you can be a professional and presentable person, right? So I think that's the biggest thing to work on is just sort of take a step back and look at yourself and be like, would I be proud of seeing myself say these things and do these things in X amount of time, right? You always gotta think of your image from a third party perspective, I think is the most important thing for up and coming like people looking for orgs, looking for exposure, etc.
Yeah, what Spectrum went through is pretty accurate, and I don't have too much to add on to it, but something that I was thinking about while he was talking was that yeah, from a third party perspective, you have to think about how they see you, how your reputation in the community is, and you have to network a bit to like uh make sure that you're sort of known, I guess is the word. I guess you could say it because uh, uh, an org wouldn't just straight up just pick you up. You could say, "Hey, me and my friends, we're all champs. We're really good players. We beat like this team in a scrim. We're really good at ranked or something like that." Like, but if you have nothing to prove that you can be good in a comp setting, then they're not going to want to pick you up. Like he was saying, you can't just walk up to SSG and be like, "Hey, we're really talented young gunners. You want to pick us up?" You kind of got to start and work your way up. Start with like a smaller org and then build up your reputation as players, build up your reputation as a roster and work your way up into a bigger org. You can't just start at the top. You got to like grind as much as you're grinding in Siege to become better. You have to grind through your like networking, through your reputation, through your connections with everybody else in the community.
Yeah, and just like that, your sense of being humble, being a likable person, could just directly impact what doors you open through the networking that you build. It's like there's another question in chat saying, I'm sure all of you guys had a lot of people DMing you on Twitter, talking to you on Discord, wanting to be on your team. What are like the specific qualities that you want to look for in people? And really like what could be those really big flaws that you're just gonna kind of like shy away from somebody or turn them down if you see?
Um, for like player wise, I think it's Canadian on the 6 on 6 podcast basically nailed it, saying like willingness to to improve and to learn, right? Like he said, the reason why False is such a good player is because he is always trying to improve and he's always trying to he's always asking questions on how he can be better. And I think that um that's probably the most important thing because you it also happened again on the 6 on 6 podcast where they asked the coaches, would you like a team of really good players that weren't coachable, or would you like a team of worse players that were really coachable, right? And I think that when you're picking up a new person to add to your roster, whether it's a player, whether it's some sort of support staff, I think uh being flexible and being able to learn is something really important, right? You can't have anybody think putting themselves above the team. Um, which and I think being open to communicate as well, right? Like the biggest issue we've had on our team, for example, is sort of being like down to earth and real with each other, right? Like we're all human. We realize we make mistakes and we literally have a channel in our Discord where everybody after every scrim posts what like their thoughts about themselves and the rest of the team, and it's not meant to whether it's positive or negative, it's not meant to sort of just dog on your teammates, right? Like I wouldn't give anything to I would give anything for my teammates. Like they're amazing. I appreciate all the time that they give into everything, but it's like the way that we get better is as a unit, and how like that sort of willingness to be open to communicate to improve is something that I personally think is the most important factor, right? I would much rather take uh, a worse mechanically skilled player that was willing to learn rather than a champ who had the biggest ego on the planet and literally just like muted me in Discord whenever or deafened whenever I was starting to talk, right? So
Yeah, what Spectrum is saying is really accurate. Like, I've talked about like us losing last night a couple or 2 nights ago a couple of times, but something that you really got to think about and what he was nailing on the head was after the loss, how do you treat the loss? Do you go in and do you all talk about it calmly, talk about what went wrong, what you can improve, or are you just all a bunch of hot-headed people that are hard to work with, you know? You got to like make sure that you're not just a siege player. You have to be like willing to work with other people and willing to cooperate and uh work together, I guess. Yeah.
Um, so one thing for me, I guess, like just so I could kind of apply to our team a little bit. So we started filming Into the Dark a little bit too late for this to come up in the actual series, but one of the issues that we were dealing with at the beginning of the off season was people were a little sensitive when it came to criticism, which would have been great to see how like at the beginning of the off season we kind of addressed that issue, and this mostly came from the players themselves. They kind of had a meeting and they talked amongst each other and were like, look, we are not handling criticism well. Like people are unable to kind of critique their teammates and make everybody better overall. It would have been really awesome to kind of see that progression from week one to all the way through week nine. Yeah, that's one thing that I think I kind of undervalued on this team was having players that are just willing to accept criticism and understanding what that actually means. Like, it's not about taking it personally. It's literally just your gameplay, right?
Yeah, it's just have understanding the differences between what's almost like on the field and off the field drama and how to really relate to how you handle yourself off the field to translating that onto in the field. At the end of the day, if somebody maybe has like point 0.1 or point 0.2 of a KD better, maybe he's gonna get one or two more frags a game, but he's gonna roam off site deafened and not listen to calls. So your strats are like having four people as opposed to somebody who's actually gonna sit there and be part of a five-man team. And because at the end of the day, Siege is a team game. Every single person matters. Every single person should have a voice, and being able to have a cohesive unit is probably the biggest strength you can have, especially as you start to move up into these bigger and better things, those higher level leagues, higher level opponents, higher level scrims, regardless. But I guess
I
we can
can
go to
can I
our
just add
fine.
something real quick?
Oh yeah, of course.
So sort of like going back to tips more so is um you mentioned like like you know somebody who's going to have a better KD and maybe get a couple more kills and stuff, but it's at the end of the day, if they're not playing as a team, it doesn't really matter. I think one of the biggest things for up and coming players or players especially who are like me and tend to get affected by mental, like unbind your scoreboard, like don't look at it, right? Literally just like I do this now in matches. It's like I know that it's like I don't care, like yeah, if I'm playing well, I'm going to be playing well and I'm going to know it. I don't need to see the scoreboard to do that. But if I'm playing poorly, I also am like aware of it, and then just the numbers on screen just demoralize me even more. So I think that it's one of those things where I've changed that, and my mental in game has been way better because I'm not, if you're reinforcing a wall or whatever, you're just spamming tab, and then you see you're 1 and 8 or whatever, and you're just like, I'm playing horrible, but it doesn't matter, right? You're as long as you're improve like you're doing your job essentially, as long as you're using your utility and whatever, it doesn't really matter if you're getting kills because like as long as your team's doing it right. I think the most important part is to go back, and if you watch your own gameplay, that's when you can look at your performance and your numbers, because the mental doesn't affect you in the moment, right? I think that's the time to look at your stats, because I think they're important. I think stats are definitely important, right? You don't want to be negative every single game, but I think in the moment of the game, the most important thing is to play your game and keep your head, like just keep your head level and just keep going and hope that you can improve and you can do better, because I think that the a lot of people are numbers people, right? And it just the scoreboard is just either it's going to boost their ego and they're going to get promoted to doc and just slay everybody, or they're going to be at the bottom of the leaderboard and be like, oh my god, I suck so much. But then in reality, they're playing smoke, they're playing thermite, they're playing clash, whatever. They're playing Wamai sitting in a corner ready to get naded 8 billion times and then not even see a person, right? Like I remember it was on Villa, my teammate Zig, he was 0-0-5 up until the 6th round, and then he got 2 big impact frags. And it's like, I wouldn't say that he was playing bad. Every single position he was playing in, for the most part, he got util dumped. Does the scoreboard reflect that? Absolutely not, right? So I think that that's one of the key things that people spectating and in Twitch chat and stuff and on Twitter like just don't realize, that it's like there are way more impacts to a game than just getting kills, right? So, and I think just sort of separating yourself from the numbers is one of the biggest things to improve your mental in game. So,
Yeah, it's almost like to the idea of, would you rather have an Ash that sprints into sight and maybe gets a kill per round, or would you rather have the Thermite that breaches, gets the control, plants the diffuser, then dies? Like, which one actually helps the team more in the grand scheme of things? It's just finding, necessarily not focusing directly on those numbers. That's why I think Siege GG has a really good thing with the cost and like all those other factors that go into it, a lot more than just straight KD ratio and those sort of metrics, because of how complicated Siege is, does paint a little bit of a better picture, but it's also just overall how you feel with the team. And really, if you're looking at the scoreboard, the only thing that really does matter is the 7-5 or 7-4 win. Whichever rounds, those are sort of the only numbers you should really be harping on. But I think we're almost out of questions. I guess, is there, do you, any of you guys have any social media or anything you want to plug? Anybody in chat as well, if you have any burning last minute questions as these guys go over their Twitters or however else they want to plug, if you could type those in, we'll make sure to talk about those.
um I think I want to add one last thing sort of about like a developing scene. And then we can obviously get into our cloud chasing with our Twitter plugs and everything. um, but I think that it was mentioned before. I believe Headless, you said like people not knowing like who you were, and like just sort of being unknown to a sense, right? It was a big thing for us, especially like in our game against Altiora. Like before that, they were squires. They were a pug stack that made it through quals, and we're like,
Yeah.
who? What? Like we had no VOD, we had no anything, right? Because especially since the quals weren't casted and they weren't like there was nothing like that. We had almost no information to go off of in that game, and I think that people don't like Nordic is a very different story, and we kind
Mhm.
of dropped the ball with Nordic, which is unfortunate. That's a whole other story. But Nordic had a lot of VOD on them, and it made some of it a lot of it's old, but it shows tendencies that a team will have, right? Because they've had the same core of that team for a long time, and I think the freshness of the scene is really something that people don't understand. Like it's probably something I shouldn't do, but like after the match, I open my Twitter and it's just like I just see everyone like coming down on us saying like how bad we are, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I love to see that. But it's like Oregon, I fell off the roof. On like there was nothing I could do. Could I played it a lot safer? Could I played it other ways? Yes, I definitely could have. I realized that. Thank you, Twitter analysts. Um, but at the same time, it's like in that situation, I was stuck in an animation. There was nothing I could do. But it's like, I open Twitter? Did I see that? Did I see Discover R6 on Twitter flaming me with the clip? Yes, I definitely did. But it's like they don't the things that like it's things like that where people don't realize that it's a brand new scene. Like it's just like APAC when it started that we don't have the competitive exposure to us in a sense that like we don't we've never been on this stage before. We've never been doing this. There's nerves, there's unknowns for teams, there's all these sort of things. And it's like also the fact that for the SFU team anyways, we were playing Bank and Border, and then all of a sudden in quals we had to play Theme Park in Oregon. And like it was a huge change in map pool, and we're just like, okay, but there's a lot of new things, there's a lot of change, and the limited like amount of teams in the league sort of ends up like almost I don't know how to word it. It's really tough. It's like hmm, it's kind of it's making us have to guess a decent amount when first going into these matches because we've never played these teams before. We don't have a lot of info on them other than Nordic, for example. Like Mirage, sure the players have history, but that team doesn't really have history as well, right? So there's not a lot of info to go off of. We kind of just got to work on our game and make sure our game is there. And like people don't realize that, right? People when they're spectating don't realize that we're a lot of us are just trying to do the best that we can to work on ourselves, and not we're not at the level of the US division where it's like there is tons of analysis work and like scouting to be done, and like you just can't do that right now. Sure, as the league develops, that's something that will happen, right? There will be VOD on these teams, and you'll scrim them more and more and more. But it's just like we have nothing. We have a very not nothing. We have very little to go off of right now, and it's a big struggle that I don't think that a lot of the people outside of the scene realize.
Did anybody else want to build up on that or have any inputs towards that idea?
I want to say that I agree with that a lot. In CAPL, you have that issue. Now in CACL, you have that issue, but like double, because it's a little less, But not to diminish it, but like say for our first game against Valors, they're a team of players who've been in the scene for a while, who have been in CL before. We don't have any VODs on them, but we know like their play styles as players, and we could guess what's going on with them, and we won 2-1. Then with Honor, which used to be the old Thread the Needle roster, that went to Canadian Nationals, we know how they play as well. They're like how their play style is as a team, because their core roster has been together for a long time. We lost 1-2, but it was very close. But then against Axios, a team that I don't think I've ever seen any of the players before, we lost 0-2 because they were more well prepared. We didn't know what they were doing, and we weren't on our game. But a big factor of that is that we weren't prepared for them specifically, because they were doing things that we were not ready for. Like I'm not going to say that like they did anything like insane like strat wise, but like uh like Spectrum was saying, if we were to have those VODs, if we were to have that like input on how they play, what kind of strats they run, what kind of maps they like, what map pool they're good at, it would factor in a lot more in the Canadian scene.
Do you guys have dedicated analysts, just out of curiosity?
Yep, we have. My team has two, and they serve very different purposes, right? They're specialized in different areas, but again, I understand the situation that they've been put in. They have very little to go off of, right? So they're more
Yeah.
focused on us right now and sort of looking at how we perform and the issues that we have, rather than looking at our opponents. So yeah, it's definitely something that's very tough for them, and I do feel sorry for them almost because like they're trying their best, right? And
Mhm.
I think that it's all that we can ask them to do. So I appreciate them for sure, but it's yeah, they're definitely in a tough spot.
For our team, we actually dropped our coach recently, and we're looking for a new one. But we had a coach and two analysts. Um, and the first analyst was more focused on VOD review and actually like analyzing how we were playing and trying to correct the behaviors. And the second one was more focused. He did a bit less, not to diminish like what he's done, but he did more so like on like the stats side of things. Although there's not much to go off in terms of the Canadian division and CACL, but yeah.
Right. I guess my advice, in case anybody is in the chat who's still looking to like, I guess, join a team or figure out like what to do. I mean, obviously you can hit up one of these two individuals and show them your stuff if you really think you've got it. But even then, like y'all scene is so new that if there was like an analyst or a coach out there looking for a position, I would definitely start with the Canadian League. I mean, first off, they're brand new scene, and then second, in the I guess it's like the phase 3 playoffs, right? They're ultimately one of those teams is going to end up facing a North American team, right? So that's kind of where you can kind of get your foundation to start scouting. First, you start scouting the Canadian teams, whether it be Pro League or Challenger League. And then at some point, as long as you grow alongside the team, then you will ultimately start to scout any Pro League team. So yeah, hopefully someone in the chat will reach out to one of you guys or something. I don't know.
We My team at least is actually LFT right now as well. Our fifth is leaving because of visa issues. The Canadian division in
For the
CACL, they have to have what's it called? Only one American player is allowed on the team, and then the rest have to be Canadian. And because he can't live in Canada anymore because of his visa, we're looking for a new player.
I think that that's something as well that it's like I believe in a Siege GG interview, Dot Dash mentioned this that the player pool is so much smaller, right? And out of I think there's 9 spots on the team. There's the 5 main spots, there's 3 sub spots, and then a coach. And out of those spots, only one of them is allowed to be American. The rest of them have to be Canadian, and it really hinders us. And like analysts and other sort of support staff don't count to face it as like main roster stuff because they're not allowed to sub in, right? Where technically a coach can sub in, so that's why the rule applies. But I definitely think if it was lifted to two, right, to 2 players allowed like internationally, I suppose, like it would be definitely one of those things where it would bring in a lot of new talent. It would speed up the growth of the scene, right? I think it would be beneficial a lot to the scene, but I people don't realize that is that it's like we have a very limited amount of players we can choose from, right? It's not like we can just we can't pull a Sonics and transfer over to EU players and work them into our game, right? We just can't do that, right? It's just not a thing that we're allowed to do. So it's definitely a very challenging position to be in.
Yeah, it's just like one of those things is the scene is eventually gonna grow, but right now it's hard to judge it in the way that it's trying to evolve. And it is definitely going to eventually get there, but having it be directly compared to the neighbors of NA League is it's definitely not a fair comparison at this point. And it's kind of hard to talk about something that's been established for so long and is at the peak pinnacle versus something that's new, and especially with those rules such as the 4-to-1 ratio as opposed to most teams usually do the 60% 3 out of 5 rule. It's just making things a little bit more difficult. But I think we're all good to wrap up now. I'd like to individually thank each of you guys for coming out. If you want to just go ahead and say your names once again, plug anybody such as like your orgs, any other your players, or your Twitter. do a little bit of that clout chasing as you talked about a little bit earlier, Specky.
Yeah, I'm Spectrum Specky. I'm at SpeckyR6 on Twitter. I really just wanted to sort of end off by saying like when I appreciate my teammates, I appreciate my org and all the work that they're putting in, but also at the same time, I really appreciate a lot of the some of the uh, professional scene, whether it's coaches or players from the U.S. division or from like globally that are respectful towards us, right? Like to name a few names, like Laxing defending me on Twitter and Dizzle congratulating me on making pro league. It's like they're just there's people who really like their respect goes a long way, and I think that even just like being open to scrim our teams or to say some kind words on Twitter or whatever it is, like it goes a long way. And I wanted to just personally thank everyone who sort of respected us in that sense.
Yeah, so I'm headless at headless6 on Twitter. I'm on PDHM Gaming CACL. I don't really have anything else to plug, but like Spectrum is going through, thank you for everyone that brought us here. Thank you for Calvrix for inviting me on here. Appreciate that. And what about you, Christian?
Nothing, just thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it, and always look forward to representing obviously my school, my team, and the collegiate scene. So
And I've been the moderator trying to wrestle and getting some good questions out of these guys. My name is CDABS. If you follow me on Twitter at CDABSR6. But with that, we're going to go and close out this panel. Make sure to stay tuned for all the exciting news that both CR6 and CEA have on with the rest of their summer leagues. This is also the end of joint collegiate week, as after this, we will go our separate ways once again, and the most ambitious crossover in collegiate scene will unfortunately be over. But I'd like to wish each and every one of you guys a really great night, and thank you so much for tuning